YouTube, and it can be viewed later by visiting the Sunnyside Wastewater Service website at scrd.ca/Sunnyside. I'd like to give a few minutes just to make sure we have any latecomers are able to join us. If you have questions during the presentation, you'll feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom feature. We'd prefer if you would type them in during the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have a period where you can ask questions and we'll try to answer them. Okay, looks like we have some good numbers here tonight, so we're going to get started. Once again, this is a presentation for the Sunnyside Wastewater Service Area. Okay, that should be full screen now. So this is your 2020 capital funding update. The following map on the screen ahead of you there is the service area, and if you're outside of this, it's a good chance we'll be covering your presentation in the coming future. Check the website at www.scrd.ca/wastewater for more information. Today we're going to cover a couple topics. First off, we'll go over the previous review to make sure everyone's on the same page and we're all up to date. We're going to go over the capital funding update. That is the main topic for today. We'll discuss what's coming up next for the Sunnyside Wastewater Service Area, and we'll take some questions at the end. So briefly, we'll just touch on what we've talked about in the past. In 2019, we initiated a wastewater service review, which gave us a high-level review of the wastewater services delivered by the Sunshine Coast Regional District. From that, we developed asset management plans, which were specific reviews for each single service. This is a detailed collection of all the information surrounding each service, including the service establishment, which bylaws were relevant, and an asset inventory. And this allowed us to do a preliminary life cycle and operational cost analysis. We presented this to the board in 2019 in November, and we followed up with some community engagement where we hosted information sessions that we may have seen you at. We used that to gather feedback and share our preliminary findings. We created some fact sheets to help get some more information out. And then since then, we revised the budget for every wastewater service, and we made a rate adjustment that was put forward to the board and passed in 2020. Some of the key findings from the 2019 wastewater service review was that existing revenue is unsustainable. The operations budget was often greater than the revenues we generated from user fees, which meant that contributions to reserve funds were frequently deferred. We also found that the future capital expenditures that were coming forward were not planned for, and the ratio of reserves that were saved up for capital projects were much lower than the future capital expenses. Just a little recap here on how the previous funding model worked. We collected frontage fees from every parcel in the service area, and we collected user fees from every participant or parcels that were connected to the wastewater service within the service area. These two revenues were combined to form the operating budget, which was used to cover the annual operating expenditures. It was used to build the capital reserve, and it was used to build the operating reserve. We didn't think this was a very clear and transparent way for the revenue to be allocated. So some of the key outcomes of the previous review were the decoupling of user fees and frontage fees. Going forward, user fee revenue, well, at all times, user fee revenue only funds, going forward, user fee revenue only funds operation and maintenance expenses, and frontage fees only fund capital expenses. An extensive review of the operation and maintenance requirements for your service and all other services was conducted. We audited the operation and maintenance activities, We revised the operation and maintenance budget to ensure adequate funding, and we established minimum reserve targets to make sure that at all times we're able to do the work we need to do. This is an annual process, and we'll continue to review this annually. We also developed a capital funding model to help prepare to plan for future expenses. So our funding model now looks like this. Our user fees and frontage fees are two separate parallel streams of revenue. User fees are only used for operations and maintenance, and they only contribute to operations and maintenance reserve outside of that, and frontage fees for capital expenditures and capital reserves. So one of the questions we get a lot is, why do we need an operating reserve? Unforeseen repairs can exceed the annual operating budget, and we're unable to borrow for operational expenses. So therefore, operating reserves are important to make sure that all work can be done when it needs to be done, and we don't have a malfunction system that continues to operate in an improper order. One important note is that operating reserves are only for your service area. They can't be used for wastewater services or any other projects other than your service area. So outside of this review that we conducted, there's an impact on your wastewater rates. The audit of the wastewater budget for the Sunnyside service area was increased by 71%. And we saw user fees increase from $125 in 2019 to $306.47 in 2020. We also saw the creation of an operations and maintenance reserve contribution fund. This is planned to be a 5-year temporary funding model to help build the operations and maintenance reserve to make sure we have the money, as we spoke about earlier. And finally, the frontage fee was increased from $51 to $102. The total increase was $617.47 from 2019 to 2020. We are pursuing grants for some of the upcoming work for Sunnyside, so we're hoping to have that 5-year operations and maintenance reserve be a shorter term than 5 years. So since that review, there's been some new developments. We heard a lot from the community when we went and visited, and we got a lot of feedback. We went back and looked at our model. Some of the criticisms that were given to us was that we were too conservative. So where we could, we reduced engineering allowance estimates. We reduced the contingency we felt was necessary for future projects. We definitely considered a higher tolerance for debt. Residents felt that using debt funding to pay for their future infrastructure was more reasonable than we originally thought. So we considered financing larger portions of future projects. And we also heard that the uncertainty surrounding the rate structure was causing strain on residents. And so we're proposing the creation of a 5-year rate structure, which will be revised annually. The 5th year will be introduced every year. And hopefully this allows the residents to have advance notice of any rate structure changes. Sorry for the low volume. Other new developments are we introduced a savings in borrowing rates that match current rates. This was just updated, but we introduced a variable borrowing rate based on the term of the loan to reflect the realities of borrowing. We also applied a variable construction cost index to better reflect construction inflation rate over time. So for the effect of this is that projects that are in the near future are inflated generally at a lower rate than projects that are in the far distance future because of the uncertainty around them and the history of inflation across Canada. So going forward, just some reminders of some of the factors that contribute to the model before we get into the financial model. Provincial legislation, specifically the Local Government Act, dictates that local service areas and regional districts can be funded only by the participants of those service areas. And this means that because we have such a small service area, there's only the number of parcels that are there can fund the infrastructure, as opposed to a recreation or something like that, where we have the whole coast we can generate revenue from. All infrastructure degrades over time, and your system in Sunnyside is approaching almost 50 years old, I believe, or 40 something now. This results in reduced performance and higher maintenance costs. And finally, infrastructure costs inflate over time. We don't pay the same price today that we did for a house 25 years ago, and the same can be said for capital infrastructure like public projects. So how we came up with the capital funding plan, this is just a little background on the method. We calculated the expenditures, so we developed a timeline of anticipated replacement for each piece of the wastewater service using the estimated useful life of the infrastructure. We use, where possible, the most recent replacement costs, whether that's a similar piece of infrastructure we've done or a project that we're aware of. This reduces the inflationary effect potentially on the future estimates. We use our variable rates from construction cost indexes, and we include debt financing costs to account for the carrying of debt and the associated costs of that. On the flip side, where we build a balance, reserve balance, we do apply the annual interest accrual. Some key points are that we do use the most recent replacement costs, similar systems, new technologies that comes along. So as we review these annually, we'll be looking at any new information that comes across our desks. And the timeline of anticipated replacement comes from these numbers that we talked about in our previous meetings. Treatment plants we expect to last about 50 years. Disposal systems have about a 40-year life, and collection systems last about 80 years. So this is our first look. We thought we would do a little bit of a Goldilocks here. We started with the 30-year anticipated capital expenditures, and you can see that there's only one thing on the map coming forward, and it's relatively inexpensive, especially considering the scales we've set for this graph. If we look at the treatment plant coming up in 2027, and we consider our historical rate increase, which was $6.50 a year on average, what we see here on the screen now is the reserve balance that we build heading into that. You can see that the reserves are not obviously significant compared to the upcoming cost of this. And what that results in is an increase in your user fees based on debt. So if we look at a 50-year window, we can see that we pick up the treatment plant as well as disposal field phase 1. That's the initial replacement of the disposal field we have planned. And phase 2 at the end of the 50-year window. And if we go back to that historical frontage fee increase, which has been $6.50 a year on average since 1996, when we get to 2027, we encounter a situation where our frontage fees jump from $148 to $810 just to finance the debt associated with that project. And you can see, if you look at the darker line on the bottom, our reserve balance reaches about 35% of the first phase of the disposal field, and barely notches up onto the late end. So this isn't ideal. There's a few things that we consider to be alarming about the current status of our capital funding. First would be that upcoming jump is quite large, and it's not very equitable to have a jump at any point in the plan like that, as that means the people previously were paying at a lower percentage than the people in the future. It also alarms us to have these massive deficits when we look at our reserves to the expenditures there. Debt financing causes these jumps, so they go in hand to hand. So as you can see, this jump here is an increase due to loan payment. If we back out to a 75-year window, we can see that we start grabbing on other costs here. There is concerns about, changing technology, lifespan of infrastructure, how communities change. So we don't want to look too far in the future. We don't want to look too short into the future. And we feel like 50 years for all the plants due to the 50-year lifespan of a treatment plant is an adequate range to make sure we account for a significant portion of the future capital costs when we're planning to fund these systems. So we're going to show you 3 plans tonight. We're also going to show you what might happen if we get a grant for one of these plans. We're also going to run a little poll at the end of this just to get a feeling that we can pass on to the elected officials who do make the decisions about these. what the sense was from the crowd in kind of an anonymized way. The poll has no legal binding, so no matter what the vote is, the decision is ultimately at the hands of the board once this is presented to them. So for the first plan here, we're looking at a pretty rapid increase, $200 a year for the 2020 to 2024 period, and then a 2% annual increase from 2024 to 2069. Now, 2% annual increase is basically a flat rate when you consider inflation. If we could have started this from the very beginning of this plant being constructed and passed over to the Sunshine Coast Regional District, we would be able to set a rate, inflated at 2% annually, and that would be equitable for all users across time, ideally. In this plan, we have minimal debt. And so this slide I'm going to show you adds on to the reserve balance. So you can see that the reserve balance is built, is adequate for the phase 1 and is near 50% of the phase 2 replacement. This plan is great financially. It might be a little bit too conservative. It definitely, depending on how that estimate 50 years down the road evolves over time, this is a safe bet that we'll be able to fund this effectively and sustainably. We also looked at slowing the increase down, but extending it a little bit. So we look at a $100 a year increase from 2020 to 2027, and a 2% annual increase from 2027 to 2069. Under this plan, there is some debt, but we still do have an adequate reserve balance going forward. So the phase 1 of the collection system replacement is debt funded, and you can see the reserve balance doesn't climb very quick here in 2055 region because of that. But other than that, this plan does work. We do get into a situation where as we gather more capital expenditures in the future, we may need to revise this plan to accommodate them, or if our estimates are revised lower, we can change the targets as we come up. But regardless, from $102 of our current frontage fee, we still need to come up for sure. So for these first two plans, we considered what might happen if we got a grant. And there's two different ways we can look at it. The first here, I'm going to go back one slide and forward a slide to show you the effect again. This is without a grant. And this is in the scenario where in 2026, we receive 2027, we receive a 30% grant for the treatment plant. The reserve balance we're able to build is significantly greater than the previous plan. Now, an alternative choice we could make is we could reduce the frontage fee and build the same reserve balance as the original plan without the grant. So either way, this is obviously we want to get grants where we can get them, and we'll pursue them as aggressively as we're able. Now this would be the alternative plan we'd show, and this doesn't really satisfy all the sort of attributes we're looking for in a plan in the sense of no jumps, but we've reduced the jump by increasing the frontage fees for the next 7 years by $50 a year. There's then about a 450 or about a doubling due to debt in 2027, and then we go forward at 2% from there. So this plan puts us in a situation similar to the second plan, but it's not equitable as for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years as we approach this jump. There's like a telegraphed increase in fees, which can affect possibly the real estate market or something like that. It is another way to look at it, though, as we know that times are tough financially and we need to make ends meet on all parts. So here's a quick comparison of the fees that we're looking at and the different scenarios we've modeled tonight. There are many, many more scenarios we looked at. There's many ways this can then work out, but these are the ones we're looking at currently that are best satisfy their goals and present a little bit of a variety. And so we'd like you to take a look at these here, and we're going to put a poll up on the screen and see what people think about this. And just you'll see when you see the vote pop up there, just select one, and panelists won't be allowed to vote. It's just the attendees. Okay. Thank you to everyone for voting. Seems like the majority of us look forward to having Plan 2. Okay. So I spoke earlier about a concept of a 5-year rate structure we're going to be proposing to the board. This is simply laying out the next 5 years in rates clearly so everyone can see what's coming up. And every year we would add on to the end and you can see what's coming up in 5 years. So this was what the result of the 3 plans we showed today and the rates that would end up happening. We have the far left column, the user fee, which at this time is static in this table. However, user fees are part of the operating budget, and that's reviewed annually. So that can go up and down a small amount, although we'll probably not be adjusting as much as we can as we're looking to build a reserve. And that is also reviewed annually. If it's deemed unnecessary because we have sufficient reserves, then that contribution will be eliminated early. Now the green, purple, and red columns summarize the frontage fees and then the total amount including user fee and contribution for the next 5 years. This is what will be presented to the board, and hopefully going forward, this is what you'll be aware of as we enact these plans and get to the point we have sustainable funding for our wastewater service areas. That, just to remind if anyone wants to look at that slide again, this whole presentation is available on YouTube. You can go to the wastewater service website, www.scrd.ca/Sunnyside. Going forward, our upcoming work is to finalize the capital funding model, just make sure all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, and then we're going to present it to the board. We're going to continue to pursue grant opportunities for future work wherever we can, whether that's the feasibility study we've currently applied for or the replacement of the treatment plant in 2027. We're going to continue to review the operations and maintenance budget and refine our annual projection of maintenance cost. And we'll continue to reach out and make sure you're informed about where we're at in this process. So in conclusion, our current rates are not financially sustainable. There are multiple ways to make this work, and we're looking for something that works best for everyone. There's an old adage that there is no one thing that works for everyone, but hopefully we can find that. And we'll do an annual review to maintain up-to-date information, which you can find on the webpage at www.scrd.ca/Sunnyside. Now, if you have any questions, you're welcome to put your hands up, and we'll take them one at a time. Hello, go ahead, Phyllis.
Say again what you were going to do in 2027? Hello?
Hi, Phyllis.
Hi.
What was the question, sorry?
What is it you were going to do in 2027? Replace what?
The treatment plant, which is a currently a tank. So we'll be digging out the old tank and replacing the new one. The technology we're looking at was used up in Canoe Road recently, and it's a coconut husk combination system.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Phyllis. Appreciate your question. You're also welcome to ask questions in the chat and to review the chat feature where some questions have been asked. I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Donna, would you like to say anything, or is this a good time to just pass on that if there's any further questions, you can contact us?
Well, I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat. Oh, I see. There seem to be a lot of questions as regards the legal situation of the lot on which the plant is and the easements for the sewer lines. Do you have any more information on that?
So for the the uncertainty around exactly who owns the right of way and the treatment lot is on the docket to be reviewed for 2021. As far as there have been some questions emailed to me regarding procedural sort of questions about replacing the right of way and when we do the collection system and that sort of thing, who is responsible for what. We're just gathering information and getting that ready. There is no imminent plans to work in the collection system, so we're not in a huge rush to get an answer until we're sure of it.
Thank you. So I will ask, so the first item is to replace the treatment plant. The second item down the road is for what?
That would be the collection system, phase one of the collection system. So there's two arms of the collection system, one that runs down the road and one that runs the back of some property.
And is phase one the one on the road or the one between the properties?
I believe it's the one on the road. We've just divided it by distance, so there is no plan at this time as to how that would exactly. We just use average costs per meter for the project at our current rates, and then inflate it to the future values. So I don't want to make any certainty estimates on that sort of thing.
Okay. And how is a situation usually handled if there isn't an easement? Do we have to get an easement, like from property owners, or what is the normal process?
It's a great question. I don't think it's something that happens, in normal day-to-day operations. An example that will probably, I was just reading the article in the Coast Reporter about the highway improvements that they've come out of the study, and they're talking about realigning Red Roofs Road and acquire the private property. So we would enter into negotiations with the property. There's some, effect on the value of property. I'm assuming you mean where the disposal field is, Donna.
Well, I was also wondering about the collection lines that run between the properties, between people's backyards.
I don't want to speculate too much. We don't have an answer to that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just for perpetuity, I want to raise a question from one of the participants. The question was, you seem to want to go ahead in 27. I'm assuming you mean with replacing the treatment plant. What about if it isn't broke, don't fix it? And yeah, definitely, we aren't intending to without functioning infrastructure, but based on performance and engineers analysis, we're hoping to have a feasibility study done in the next couple of years, and that's one of the grants we're pursuing to give us direction and a better idea of what we're going with. If the feasibility study tells us we have 20, 25 years left in our infrastructure, then good for us, but we don't want to plan for the best.
Hello,
Hello.
it's Phyllis. Your voice is getting mumbly at the second half of your sentences. So I've missed a few things in your last couple of answers.
I apologize. My mouth is dry. I've been talking too much.
Oh, you need a drink. I wanted to also make a comment. When I bought my property 7 years ago, the easement is marked on the real estate documents.
Yeah, I've seen some drawings that indicate an easement, and some owners have suggested that might not be the case. So we're just making sure we have full correct information before we.
That they don't have any easement, or?
It's a statutory right of way, but yeah, in the back of the yard of the properties, I believe there is a right of way that
Yes.
conveys the collections.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everyone for their patience tonight. Sorry for the sound issues. We're working in the boardroom here, and it's a bit of a technical effort to make this work. If there's any uncertainty or any questions you'd love to have follow-up on, please feel free to contact us, email or phone calls. We're available to answer these questions in more detail, hopefully under better technical situation. Go ahead, Phyllis.
I didn't have anything else.
My bad. I will put your hand down. We had a question about the timeline for the engineer's report. So we've currently applied for an infrastructure planning grant from the BC government, which will pay for up to, I believe, 75 or 80% of the cost of the feasibility study. This cost we're estimating to be about $7,500. So because there is not immediate urgency to replace the plant due to a known defect, we're hoping to get the grant before we get a consultant to come in and do the feasibility study. We applied for the first round of feasibility study or grant money in early 2020, and we received 2 out of 6 applications. Sunnyside is in the second round of applications, which should be awarded in October. So we'll know in October if we get the grant, in which case we will be seeking a consultant to do a feasibility study. If we don't get the grant, we will go back to the board, and if there is more windows to apply for grants, we will ask for their direction whether we should go ahead with a feasibility study or apply for a grant to try to offset the costs to the service area. Phyllis, what about joining the sewer system? Is it cheaper? I think you mean the municipal sewer system that Gibson's operates. Last time I looked at the maps, I didn't see that there was a trunk line that runs near Sunnyside, so I don't believe this is an option. Collection systems are expensive as well, even up there. Donna, would you like to add that?
Yeah, I can jump in there. No, nobody outside of the town of Gibson's is in the town sewer system. It does not extend into Area E. Not an option.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the political and the governmental agreements aside, I'm not sure it's even possible. Just to add to the record, because this is going on YouTube, I'm not sure the questions are visible. We've had one question asked the other houses on the street do. I believe it is septic system. I've seen the old drawings from the 70s, and it showed that in a very discrete location where your homes are located, the engineer identified unsuitable soil for septic. So I believe the issue that caused the engineer to choose to build a community sewer system was a very localized problem. The other question that I believe Noel Fraser's asked is, given the cost of upgrading the current system, I think it would make sense to explore this option. And I believe you're asking about or comment about on-site wastewater systems or your own septic systems. There's a few issues to consider here. As far as whether or not it's possible to do an on-site wastewater system to your own individual one, that you'd need to get an engineer to come in, assess your soil, and tell you that answer. I know that the technology has come a long way since 1979 when this was constructed, so it is possible now the solutions are this. The second component of this option is that we are in a service area that has been established by law. We alter that. There is a staff report being prepared regarding this issue that should be published at the September 17th Corporate and Administrative Services Committee. So that's coming up in just over a week and a half. And this issue will be addressed there. The complication and issues around adjusting a service area. So there's two parts. If you were to put on your own, currently under the existing system, if you were to construct your own, you would still pay frontage fee for the regional district until you were removed from the service area by bylaw. The process of that bylaw amendment will be further discussed at the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee, number 7. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm not in a rush to leave here. Oh, one more question every time I say. It's a perfect way to get another one. Phyllis, you have a question. I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking, so I'm just going to back up my presentation here a bit, and we can go to the very first slide and just use a little map. There we go. So this is the, oh, I hope this helps you understand the issue. I see that your question was answered. Just to direct your attention for a second to the chat box there. Director McMahon has posted a message just to help you guys get together and be informed on this issue. If you want to get a hold of her, her email address is donna@everythingelphinstone.ca. She will follow up on the next week's meeting if you're not able to attend, and let you know where we're at. Okay, just trying to get one more question here. I hope everyone's had a informative hour with us this evening. Thank you for joining us virtually. I know there's probably more questions out there, and if anything comes to you in the next little while, please feel free to email myself or anyone. The easiest way to get a hold of us is info@scrd.ca. And again, all this information will be posted, this video, your asset management plan, on the SCRD website for the Sunnyside Wastewater Service, and that is at www.scrd.ca/Sunnyside. I need to get a glass of water here pretty soon, so I'm going to log off. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening.